The trial of Johnny Depp against Amber Heard continues to provide us with a wealth of material to understand narcissism. As I've commented previously, and no doubt I'll comment again, so much material comes from this trial that I could be here until Christmas dissecting each and every part of it to explain what's going on in terms of the behaviour of the parties and, of course, putting all of this through the lens of narcissism for you. The jury, of course, is hugely important. They have to make a determination as to who is telling the truth. Is it the case that Amber Heard is the victim and that Johnny Depp is the abuser? Is it the other way around? Or perhaps is a bit of both? What's clear is neither party is going to come out completely smelling of roses. Many people have commented that they find the two individuals quite odious. However, there are many who remain of the view, and certainly in the court of public opinion, that Depp is the victim here, and that he has suffered abuse, and therefore his behaviours in terms of drug taking, the drinking of alcohol to excess, the shouting, the threats, the responses, has been reactive to the abuse that he has received. Heard, of course, maintains that she is an habitual and repeated victim of domestic violence, and that she is the victim here. Naturally, it is for the jury to make that decision, and Amber Heard has certainly been playing to the jury. If you have watched any of the footage, you will have seen that repeatedly, during the giving of evidence and her cross-examination, she turns to the jury to relay her answer. This is something that she has been told to do. It's a standard response and tactic. The idea is that if you're a witness or a party in the litigation, you give your evidence either to the judge, where it's judge alone that's sitting, or you give your evidence to the jury, should one be involved. The purpose of this is to try and break the flow of the attorney that's cross-examining you, and it's to try and endear you to both judge or jury, depending on who you're speaking to. In some instances, this can be effective. But with Amber Heard, she takes the question from the attorney during cross-examination and immediately relays it to the jury. She snaps her head back to the attorney, takes the next question, snaps her head back to the jury, gives a short answer, snaps her head back to the attorney, and back and forth as if she was watching a particularly vigorous tennis match. It looks artificial. It's disingenuous. Anybody watching can see that she's just back and forth, and that it doesn't appear to be natural. But are the members of the jury accepting what she's saying? It's crucial that they accept her evidence, and it would appear that they are not. Why might this be? And also, what's the impact? Well, to understand more about this, an article by Megan Fox, no, not that one, has spoken to an individual called Nick Rikita, who has actually been watching what the trial has been doing, and also an individual called Rob Morton, who has also attended the trial, and what he has done is he has been watching the jury, and he actually stood in line and won a place inside the courtroom. Now, of course, the jury are kept off screen for the most part, but Morton has been up close, and he has been reporting on what he's been seeing. And this is covered in the article by Megan Fox and makes interesting reading because it not only tells us more about perhaps the direction in which this trial is going, if his analysis is correct, but moreover about the behaviour about Amber Heard and how the jury aren't buying what she's selling. The article explains, as Morton details his findings, the gallery seems to be mostly pro-Johnny. He reported that there are 3 males between the ages of 20 and 30, 2 males in their 30s, a black woman in her 40s, an Asian woman in her 30s, a Polynesian man in his 40s, a Caucasian female in her 50s, and a Caucasian man in his 60s. Morton reported that the Polynesian man seems completely over it. He's completely checked out, Morton said, and doesn't believe anything Amber Heard is saying. He just puts his hand over his face every time she starts talking. The jury is really not showing a lot of reaction. They're not looking at her. They'll give her glances here and there. The attorney went on to describe the lengths that some jurors will go to in order to avoid eye contact with Amber Heard. One of the jurors, Morton explains, I caught him writing fake notes, or faking the actual writing of notes. He would hold his pen there and just wiggle the pen back and forth and not write anything. They're not buying the emotion. They're really not. Two were calling bullshit on Heard's apparent breakdown. One had no eye contact, one put his head down, another was basically falling asleep. No one made eye contact with her except one 30s male. He went on to explain that on another day, Heard was a lot more aggressive, but the jury was not responding to it. Many of them were leaning back in their chairs, which was a sign to him that they aren't buying it. At one point during one of these emotional pieces of testimony, the jury had their chairs pointed at Elaine Brederhoft, and they were craning their necks over at the witness. That is not what you want when you are doing direct examination, Morton explained, pointing out that every lawyer wants a jury paying attention to and focused on the witness, not the lawyers. Morton also reported that Judge Penny Ascarati is visibly frustrated with Heard attorney Brederhoft for continually ignoring her rulings on objections and asking the same questions in different ways that are still against the rules. Morton opined that he wished the cameras focused on the judge more because her facial expressions show a lot. Morton also pointed out that Heard is trying to win over the jury in obvious ways. Amber Heard directs her testimony to the jurors that she thinks are on her side. When the two ladies in the upper right are believing her story, you will see her look up and directly at them. When they do not believe her story, they look down, and then she finds the young man in the middle, in the bottom. This observation is very useful for helping you understand how Amber Heard is behaving. Remember, as a narcissist, her unconscious narcissism must seek the prime aims: fuel, control, character traits, and residual benefits. And the two most important aspects of that are fuel and control. Her narcissism has to control everybody that comes up on her radar. And when she's in the courtroom, that means the attorney that's dealing with her, whether leading her in chief or cross-examining her, the judge, the jury, members of the public in the gallery, and of course, Johnny Depp, and the wider audience that is watching all of this televised. And in order to assert control, her narcissism repeatedly selects issuing pity plays, an earnest declaration of having loved Johnny Depp, that she is the hard-done-to victim, and that she must be believed. The problem that she's got is that as a combination of the fact that she's an awful actress and her narcissism is not that evolved, that when she attempts these things, it looks plastic. It looks fake. Her attempts by her narcissism to emulate a sobbing face is quite frankly laughable. And I'll be touching on the fact that she cries, but there are no tears in another video shortly. She makes lots of hysterical sobbing noises, but it's overwrought. It's too much. She contorts her face into what her narcissism presupposes is crying, but it merely looks ridiculous. As I explained in My Dog Stepped on a Bee, we saw the face that she pulled after making that statement, and I explained to you in that video precisely why she pulled that face, unconvincing as it was. So as she attempts to win over the jury, her narcissism, by playing the imitation game, and if you have not done so already, you must watch that video of mine, the imitation game, seeks to portray a particular set of facial features, a look in her eyes, a tone of voice, and the words that she's saying, all emulated to try and assert control generally by pity play and playing the victim. But her narcissism isn't very good at doing it, and thus the result is transparently rubbish. There, of course, will be people who will be taken in by it, that will make excuses for Heard because they're invested, because perhaps they've early on declared that they are Team Heard. But most people can see this doesn't look natural. And of course, those of you listening to me are now able to understand precisely why that is. A more evolved narcissist would put on a much more convincing performance and would really take people in. But she's not able to do so. And for the most part, people aren't taken in by it, and particularly the jury, if Mr. Morton's observations are correct and accurate. He talked about the Polynesian man who's already checked out, who's clearly seen through and doesn't believe a word that she says. And, of course, where he talked about the fact that when the two ladies in the upper right are believing her story, their response by looking at Heard and the expression on their face not only gives her fuel, by the look in their eyes, the expression on their face, their body language, but it also signals to her narcissism that sat there unconsciously monitoring that they're under control, and so she'll continue to talk with them and engage with them. Her narcissism focuses on those that can be controlled and are showing that they're being controlled, and then doesn't look at anybody else in order to keep her away by a form of present withdrawal from dealing with people that are threatening her control. So, later on, as Morton explained, when these two ladies don't appear to believe her story and look down, the fact that they're looking down and not engaging with her means that they are not providing her with the control that her narcissism desperately seeks. She, of course, can't go, "Hey, jurors 6 and 7, why aren't you buying my story?" She's not going to do that. She can't indirectly assert control over them by whispering to the judge, "Hey, those two juries over there, they're not listening to me, pair of shitheads," and the judge agreeing with her. That won't happen. So she can't assert control directly, although she starts there and tries to do so. She then can't assert control indirectly. She's isolated in that respect. So her narcissism then takes her to the third assertion of control and effectively causes her to withdraw from those two ladies by no longer looking at them and then finding somebody else to assert control over directly, which is the young man in the middle, in the bottom, as described by Mr. Morton. Her attempts to assert control over the jury are clearly failing, but there are some jury members that are listening to her, and when that happens, they're signalling they're under control until such time as they are not. And her narcissism is like a radar. It's sweeping, checking, evaluating, monitoring everybody that comes upon our radar as to whether they are under control or whether they are not. And if they are, she will continue to engage with that individual, or will just park it, unconsciously recognizing they're under control. In other instances where somebody is not, she will either try and assert control directly, but many times that's denied to her. She can't do it indirectly, and therefore she asserts control by withdrawal, even though, of course, she remains within the courtroom. What's also evident from what Mr. Morton has explained is that she's not scoring points with the jury. She's trying to drum up emotions, but none of the jury are reciprocating. He explained that she's not getting nods, she's not getting movement, she's not getting anything. It's stone-faced. That demonstrates, of course, that the nature of her evidence and, of course, the attempts to drum up emotions with this pathetic performance is failing. And the stony-faced response of the jury also amounts to a threat to control. So, what is interesting is that the jury aren't, according to Mr. Morton, buying the evidence of Heard, and moreover, aren't buying the performance that her narcissism is putting on. And of course, this is very helpful for you to understand the way that her narcissism seeks to assert control over the jury and the different ways that it looks to do it, but also to see how this particular type of subschool of narcissist is failing in that assertion of control. It also lets you understand that her narcissism is blinding her to the failing. Rather than her think, oh, they're not on my side, I need to change tack, she just keeps doing the same thing, because her narcissism just guides her towards somebody that she can control and keeps her away from those that she can't. She doesn't try any further to persuade or alter the behaviour towards that particular individual to bring them under control. Her narcissism can't do that. As I've explained elsewhere, she can't evaluate her own behaviour and see that she's the problem. If that juror is against her, well, they're a nasty juror, and probably Johnny has bribed them and nobbled that jury member. That's what her narcissism, through the paranoia, could well be telling her. She is incapable of thinking, hang on a second, I need to up my game in terms of how I'm performing here. I need to try and be more convincing. Her narcissism doesn't let her think that. Her narcissism, at the level that it works at, is basically saying, keep going, this is working. And where it sees that it's not, it doesn't try and improve, it just causes her to withdraw. So the fact, as per Mr. Morton's commentary, that the jury are not buying what she's selling is as a consequence of the way that her narcissism operates in an unconvincing manner, so that people aren't invested in her. Their emotional empathy for her isn't flowing. And that her narcissism blinds her to these results and causes her to continue this awful acting that she is engaging in. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.